From Chicago studios, this is the Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. Assalamu alaikum, I'm Samana Siddiqui. German Chancellor Angela Merkel on Tuesday said keeping Kabul airport open is of existential importance for Afghanistan. Without it, no medical or humanitarian aid can get in, she said, speaking at a press conference in Berlin. Merkel said Germany is ready to provide technical help to keep the airport operational. German Chancellor also announced a financial lifeline worth a total of 600 million euros to Afghanistan relief. Germany is taking an active role in encouraging relations with Afghanistan. German Foreign Minister Heiko Maas has traveled to Pakistan, Turkey, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, and Qatar to win the region's cooperation. Talking with Maas, Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan stressed the need for sustained engagement by the international community with Afghanistan after U.S. troop withdrawal. In related news, Qatar's Foreign Minister Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdurrahman Al Thani warned that isolating the Taliban could lead to further regional instability. The U.S.-allied Gulf Arab state has hosted the Taliban's political office since 2013. After the last U.S. soldier left Kabul on Tuesday, Afghanistan's new rulers say they have found Kabul International Airport in shambles. Taliban leader Maulvi Ahmadullah Muttaqi and Ariana Afghan Airlines officials said the retreating troops disabled civilian aircrafts and radar systems. The Taliban's elite Badri 313 unit is now protecting the airport. Muttaqi said according to the Doha peace agreement, the U.S. troops should have left without harming the Afghan people's national assets. Ariana International's maintenance director Ahmad Siar Rahat said damage to commercial planes will take at least 1 month and around $10 million to repair. CNN reports that U.S. Special Forces set up a secret gate at Kabul International Airport and call centers to guide Americans evacuating from Afghanistan. According to unnamed defense officials, Americans were told to gather at points close to the airport. From there, Taliban members would check their credentials and escort them to a gate manned by American forces. Through this secret arrangement with the Taliban, Americans were then guided through huge crowds of Afghans also seeking to flee. Throughout the evacuation, senior Biden administration officials stressed that the Taliban was cooperating and had committed to provide safe passage for Americans. While American soldiers have left Afghanistan, war in the country may not be over. British Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab said on Tuesday the UK retains the right to exercise self-defense after withdrawal from the country. The UK could launch airstrikes against ISIS-K, a branch of the Daesh terrorist group in Afghanistan. Raab rejected leaked U.S. claims that the UK's evacuation efforts led to a bomb attack outside Kabul International Airport last weekend. More than 170 people were killed in the attack, including 13 U.S. service members. Raab told Sky News the British evacuation was coordinated closely with U.S. troops. First, you demonize people, then you kill them. That has been the way of war. But there is one person who took a substantial risk to expose it. More details in this report by Saleha Farouk and Ali Khalaf.
90% of all people killed by U.S. drones are civilians. That is the data from the United States Air Force. No one knew about this until Daniel Hale told the world. Daniel Hale served the National Security Agency as an intelligence analyst. He leaked 17 classified documents to expose them in 2014. Now he is sitting in a jail. That is the cost of telling the truth in this world.
I'm sorry because I'm up here because I was, for a short period of time during my military career, as an analyst working with unmanned systems deployed to Afghanistan.
Those documents contained details about U.S. kill lists and civilian casualties. The Justice Department under President Obama did not prosecute Hale, but the Trump administration decided to punish him. In 2021, Hale was sentenced to 45 months in prison for violating the Espionage Act of 1917. The judge told Hale that you are not being prosecuted for speaking out about the drone program that killed innocent people. You could have been a whistleblower without taking any of these documents. Killers of civilians are free. No investigations, no charges. But the truth teller is in prison. Peace activists, however, remember Hale. In August 2021, he was honored with the Sam Adams Award for Integrity in Intelligence. He was honored for performing a vital public service at a great personal cost. Later that month, U.S. Representative Ilhan Omar wrote to President Biden requesting a full pardon. The world will need many more truth tellers for saving unknown lives. In the meantime, drones will continue to kill, and President Biden promises more drone attacks. 10% will be suspected terrorists, but 90% will be, for sure, innocent people. May God protect them.
The Islamic Center of Medicine and 14 other Islamic organizations and mosques in Wisconsin have formed an urgent coalition to help incoming Afghan refugees. Almost 50 flights have brought thousands of Afghan refugees to Fort McCoy, Wisconsin. The United Muslim Resettlement Council was formed Sunday to make sure refugees have access to necessary services. Ibrahim Saeed is president of the Islamic Center of Medicine. He told NBC 15 that each Muslim organization will help with a different area of service. This is not Saeed's first time helping the Afghan people. He previously offered assistance to those who fled Afghanistan after the 1979 invasion of the country by the former Soviet Union. Saeed said just like then, volunteers are already gearing up to help refugees start a new life. In 2009, brothers Shane Dritan and Eljaveer Duca were sentenced to life in prison for their role in an alleged plot to attack the Fort Dix military base in New Jersey. Their convictions resulted from a year-long terrorism sting involving multiple government informants. It was led by then U.S. Attorney for the District of New Jersey, Chris Christie. But a 2015 documentary by The Intercept on the Fort Dix 5 case revealed the investigation was marred by law enforcement and legal abuses. The Duca's case was one of many in which FBI officials and prosecutors operating in the post-9/11 atmosphere branded people as enemies of the state. Many of them, like the Duca brothers, were given long prison sentences or were convicted on charges of material support for terrorism. Today, some U.S. officials are signaling a desire to move on from the global war on terror. They want to focus more on new security threats at home and abroad. But families and communities torn apart by post-9/11 abuses are seeking a re-evaluation of convictions that many believe were based on trumped-up charges. Ramzi Qasim is founder of the Creating Law Enforcement Accountability and Responsibility Project. He says there hasn't been any reckoning for the legacy of that era. Since the September 11th attacks, the U.S. government has prosecuted more than 800 people on terrorism charges. Many cases included a troubling mix of judicial and law enforcement bias. Qasim said FBI stings often targeted suspects who were mentally deficient, marginalized, or otherwise vulnerable. Counterterrorism expert Arun Kundanani said there needs to be a process to collectively re-examine these cases. Kundanani, in his book The Muslims Are Coming, Islamophobia, Extremism, and the Domestic War on Terror, examines the now debunked radicalization theories behind many terrorism convictions. The use of undercover informants was one of the most controversial tactics of the FBI and U.S. prosecutors in domestic counterterrorism cases at that time. Bloomberg News reports a summer surge in COVID patients is diverting liquid oxygen from rocket launch pads to hospitals. This has prompted NASA to delay the September launch of its Earth surveillance satellite by a week. Now the space industry, including SpaceX and ULA, is anticipating launch delays as patients on ventilators take priority over rockets and satellites. Oxygen chilled to its liquid form at -300 degrees Fahrenheit is a crucial propellant for space launches. Supplies nationwide have grown tighter due to the increased medical use of oxygen. Florida has an acute need for it as its hospitals overflow with a recent surge in COVID infections. Some Florida cities, including Orlando and Tampa, have imposed water use restrictions. This is because some water treatment plants use oxygen in the sanitizing process. A shortage of commercial truck drivers who have specialized training to transport some gases like oxygen has worsened the supply problem. Colombian President Iván Duque says urgent action is needed to protect biodiversity. Duque spoke during an international meeting hosted by his government in the Colombian Amazon ahead of next year's COP15 summit. That is a two-part UN biodiversity summit that will focus on how to protect the natural world. Duque said an estimated $100 billion yearly is required to conserve and protect many of the planet's centers or epicenters of biodiversity. India's border security force killed 2 young Bangladeshi men and took away their bodies in a fresh firing incident. This comes despite a repeated commitment from India not to use lethal weapons along border areas. The incident happened on Sunday. Andalu agency reports that the youths were shot dead while returning from the Indian side with cows. India's border security force did not hand over the youths' bodies. Bangladesh's border guard has sent a letter to India's border security force in protest of the killings. It is demanding that the bodies of the young men be handed over. India shares its largest border area with Bangladesh. Stretching over 2,000 miles, it is the 5th longest land border in the world. Bangladeshi human rights organization Odekar claims border forces have killed at least 334 Bangladeshis since 2011. There were 51 killings in 2020 alone. They have also committed other instances of severe abuse. Nigerian media is reporting that a suspected Christian mob has destroyed 2 mosques and looted and razed 14 shops in the country's Plateau state last week. The incident took place a week after 23 Muslim pilgrims were also killed by a Christian mob there. Fodio Omar, secretary of the Market Association, said the 2 mosques were completely demolished despite a curfew in place in the region. Local media is reporting that villagers are stockpiling arms for self-defense as the country's security infrastructure has collapsed and fear of a communal war is rising in the area. Kashmir's top pro-freedom leader Sayyid Ali Gilani passed away at age 91 in Srinagar in Indian-occupied Kashmir. Gilani was the most prominent Kashmiri freedom leader. Despite being ill, the Indian government kept him under house arrest since 2010. Coming up next after the break is our in-depth analysis segment, so stay tuned and we'll be right back after these messages.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour. If we could find a way to get inside each other's minds. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes. Well, before you abuse, criticize, and accuse. Walk a mile in my shoes.
Despite the development of a COVID-19 vaccine, millions around the world will not have access. We need a vaccine that's free and available to everyone, everywhere. It's time for a people's vaccine.
Welcome back. In one of our previous in-depth analyses, we talked about the refugee situation in Afghanistan with the president of the World Refugee and Migration Council. Let's watch some excerpts for the show.
To further discuss the humanitarian crisis and refugee situation in Afghanistan, we have with us Ben Osler Hampson. He's the president of the World Refugee and Migration Council. Thank you so much, Dr. Hampson, for being here.
My pleasure.
So, can you tell us overall what the humanitarian situation is like in Afghanistan currently? I'd like you to address what the situation was in early July and how it has changed now with the Taliban takeover.
Well, there are 2 things that are going on. First of all, I think we have to recognize that there is an ongoing humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan because there's a major famine that is underway. There's been a major drought, and so there are significant food shortages both in rural and urban areas. At the same time, with the Taliban's takeover of the country. There has been a major flight of literally hundreds of thousands of Afghans who've been displaced inside the country, who have moved to seek refuge in cities, in parts of the country where Taliban control is perhaps not as strong as it is in others. At the same time, in the capital, Kabul, there's a humanitarian tragedy unfolding just outside the airport there, where there are literally thousands who are trying to flee the Taliban to get flights out of the country. And we're also obviously hearing about food shortages, shortages of blankets, accommodation for the many thousands who are in Kabul itself.
The ongoing fighting had already displaced several hundreds and thousands of civilians. Can you expand on the presence of IEDs, which are improvised explosive devices, on major roads?
Well, what we're hearing is that some of the fighting is continuing, and there have been certainly the Taliban when they were trying to take over the country, which they've obviously succeeded in doing. They were putting IEDs on roads, attacking civilian transport, setting off bombs in markets, in major areas of congestion. And that has obviously led to many wounded civilians, others who've been injured by their tactics.
And obviously, the world is still in the middle of a pandemic. How has the pandemic affected the situation?
Well, it's made everything a lot worse. There've literally been stories of babies, small children dying in the arms of their mothers who've gotten COVID. The latest variant, the so-called Delta variant of COVID, is running rampant throughout South Asia, I should say, many other parts of the world, obviously including Afghanistan. And when you have people who are living in crowded, unsanitary conditions, who don't have proper access to water, to food, to medicine, the problem is rendered much more acute. What we're also seeing with the Delta variant of the virus is that it is affecting, as I just mentioned, young children. It's leading to higher mortality rates among the young. Some of the earlier variants of COVID did not affect young people to the same degree. They affected older people. But as the virus has mutated, it is now attacking the young. And of course, in Afghanistan, in neighboring countries, where there are many Afghan refugees, they have no access to vaccine. So this is a highly vulnerable population at great risk. People are also getting sick, and that really compounds, the humanitarian dimensions of this unfolding tragedy, which I'm, afraid to say is only going to get worse.
We hear that there are only about 300 ventilators in the entire country. What is the state of the rest of the healthcare system, hospitals? Could you share with us? I know some of them were bombed during the fighting, but are there hospitals that are currently working in different parts of Afghanistan?
Well, there certainly some of the hospitals, some of the major urban centers are still operational. As you mentioned, when it comes to COVID, there's a shortage of ventilators, shortage of oxygen. As a result of the fighting, the fact that the Americans have pulled out, that humanitarian aid, many of those aid flights aren't able to get into the country because of the security situation. The fact that certainly in Kabul, the main international airport there, it's filled with evacuation flights, so it's almost impossible to bring in medical aid and other kinds of assistance that's required to deal with the health needs of the local population. And so, shortage of medicine in the hospitals, the fact that, you have a very uncertain security situation. I think it's fair to say that many of the women who've been trained to be doctors in the country are, worried about their own security, safety with Taliban control in the country. So, they're not able to show up for work. That's also true of other kinds of, healthcare assistance. So it's a pretty dire situation, and when it comes to the hospitals, they're also dealing with those who've been injured or wounded in the fighting, and they're not in a position to be able to take the extraordinary demands that are being placed on them.
So, what are the options for people? Currently, Iran and Pakistan host millions of refugees. The borders have been opened again for them to cross over. But Afghan refugees are often treated very poorly, especially as they're trying to make their way into Europe. And once they get into Europe, recently we did a report on how they're treated on the streets of Paris. So, what are the options for Afghans currently?
Well, the reports that we've been getting, and we've spoken to some people who are in some of those refugee camps on the border of Iran and Pakistan, and I think it's fair to say that both Iran and Pakistan are trying to control the inflow of refugees. They're not pursuing what we would call an open border policy. It's also fair to say that some of the other neighboring countries, Turkey, don't want to take more Afghan refugees. And I think what it really points to is, and to be honest, they don't have the resources and capacity to be able to feed and house those refugees. The UN agencies that are working there, like UNHCR, the World Migration Program, they're facing major funding shortfalls. And I think what's really required, and it's something we talk about in a report we released over the weekend on the 7 things that need to be done, is that we do need the Secretary General of the United Nations, under his auspices, to hold a major conference of donor countries, countries that are willing to step up to the plate to provide humanitarian assistance, both for Afghanistan and the people of Afghanistan itself, but also neighboring countries that are having to house Afghans who've been forcibly displaced by the events in their country, and at the same time to start coordinating resettlement programs for the Afghans who have been forcibly displaced, because there's little prospect that they're going to be able to go home anytime soon, and so other countries are going to have to open their arms to resettle them. A number of countries, Canada, for example, has indicated that it's prepared to accept up to 20,000 Afghan refugees. The United States has said it will accept slightly more than that number, but not by much. The British have said they will take 20,000. But those aren't large numbers, and I think it's fair to say that it's probably important not to set hard and fast quotas, to take a flexible approach for those countries who've said that they're going to accept Afghans who've been forcibly displaced. But for other countries as well, to engage in the resettlement efforts of all of these people who have left the country.
The Council has made a call to global leadership, especially on the principles of a responsibility to protect. As you look at this situation and then you compare it to what has recently taken place in Burma with the coup there, and taking over the military, taking over the civilian government, and global leadership has not really stepped up. Has been no global embargo on arms, and we see a lot of statements, but what has really been done to protect the people of Burma? Do you think that this it will be different for Afghanistan?
Well, I think this crisis was brought on by the Americans deciding to leave the country, and doing so in a rather shall we say rapid fashion that has helped create the security vacuum that was filled by the Taliban. But what I think is required is to certainly, when it comes to human rights in the country, the rights of women, for the international community to put the Taliban on notice that they're not going to be recognized as the legitimate government of Afghanistan unless they adhere to some of the public commitments they've made, that they will respect the rights of women. There won't be retribution for those who worked for the previous government or for allied forces. Now, we know for a fact that that's not the case. There are major human rights violations that are occurring as we speak. But the new government, when it is formed, as it's formed, is going to want to be seen internationally as the legitimate government, and I think all countries have a responsibility to send a very strong message to the Taliban that they're not going to get that currency, shall we say, of international legitimacy unless they can prove it, that they're living up to their responsibilities not to violate the human rights of their own citizens. I think, secondly, as some of your listeners may well know, the International Monetary Fund suspended the special drawing rights of Afghanistan shortly after the Taliban seized control of Kabul. And I think there again, that's another key point of leverage. They won't get their drawing rights back. They won't be able to borrow from international lending institutions until they've shown that they're going to be a responsible government. So those are 2 points of leverage. At the same time, I think one certainly doesn't want to, as some have been arguing, former Prime Minister Tony Blair of Britain, has been saying, well, there should be sanctions, sort of blanket sanctions against the Taliban. Well, that's not going to hurt the Taliban nearly as much as it's going to hurt the people of Afghanistan. And so it is important, as one is, as the international community is negotiating with the Taliban, to say, let's keep humanitarian corridors open. It's going to be important to allow food assistance, other kinds of assistance to get into the country. Blanket sanctions won't do anybody any good. But as I said, there are some important, what we would call political points of leverage. that I think can be used to good effect to bring pressure to bear on the Taliban. It's quite clear, though, that when it comes to the use of military force, that the international community is pulling out. It's not going to intervene in the affairs of Afghanistan. And so, one of the concerns I think we all have is, 2 or 3 weeks from now, when the United States has pulled out, that people are going to, the international spotlight is going to move somewhere else. And as many of us are arguing, it's going to be absolutely critical to keep the international spotlight on Afghanistan, to hold the Taliban to account, to use some of the points of leverage that I've mentioned.
Before we let you go, I wanted to ask you about this humanitarian land corridor. We understand that many aid agencies are still there. They're still working on the ground, CARE, ICRC. So what would this humanitarian land corridor look like? Where would it be? And what do you envision that to look like?
So humanitarian corridor would likely take a number of different forms. One is when it comes to the delivery of medicine and other kinds of assistance that has to be delivered by air, that the Taliban would guarantee safe access for flights coming into the country, and that would extend obviously not just to the international airport in Kabul, but other major centers in the country where you do have airports. That planes would not be shot at. That those delivering assistance would be guaranteed safe passage in the delivery of whether it's medicine or food or other kinds of humanitarian assistance. When it comes to overland routes, that again there would be safe passage for some of the major road points of access to the country, whether it's the Khyber Pass to Pakistan or roads into Iran. That Afghans who are trying to leave the country are guaranteed safe passage, that they're allowed to do so. And by the same token, the overland delivery of various kinds of assistance would also be, in effect, the security of whether it's food convoys, you name it, again, would be guaranteed by the Taliban. And I think, importantly, as we're thinking about the sort of humanitarian challenges, that those international organizations and non-governmental organizations that continue to conduct operations in the country, and you mentioned some of them. Some of them are under, UN auspices, some aren't. That they're allowed to continue with their work, and that their employees are not going to be put at risk. So that's also part of the humanitarian corridor concept.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Hampson, for your time and for your analysis.
It's my great pleasure to be with you. I enjoyed chatting with you.
Before moving on to our next analysis, let's take a quick break. We'll be right back after these messages.
Our fellow Americans.
Right now, the COVID-19 vaccines are available to millions of Americans.
And soon, they will be available to everyone.
The science is clear. These vaccines will protect you and those you love from this dangerous and deadly disease.
They could save your life.
So we urge you to get vaccinated when it's available to you.
That's the first step to ending the pandemic and moving our country forward. It's up to you.
over in my bedroom. Come on, come on. Okay, Dad. 1, 2, 3. Dad! You saved me. Dad?
Are you okay?
I'm fine, dear.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need at aarp.org/caregiving.
Welcome back. In our previous show, we shared the recent report by the Institute for Strategic Dialogue, which analyzed anti-Muslim content on TikTok. Author of the report is joining Imam Abdul Malik Mujahid for a detailed analysis. Over to you, Imam Mujahid.
Thank you, Samana. Today we'll be talking with someone who has been sitting and watching TikTok, not for fun, but looking for hate. He's an analyst at the Institute for Strategic Dialogue, which is London and DC and many other countries it is based. And he found, looking at 130 videos, that almost 40% of those videos, if sample is right, that is, has hate in there. And 8% are directly aimed of Islamophobia at Muslims. With us is Kyron O'Connor. Welcome to Muslim Network TV, Kyron.
Hello.
So you're having fun watching a lot of TikTok nowadays, right?
Not exactly fun. What this research is the culmination of 3 months of research of looking for, deliberately looking for content that is hateful and content that promotes extremism and includes support for terrorism as well. So quite a few dance videos were watching the process of this research, but it wasn't the overall aim of the research.
What are these, 1,030 or so videos which you selected? What are they based on? Some sampling method? Can we scientifically rely on it?
Well, the thing about this sample is that it's not a randomized sample, so I didn't cast the net out. What we wanted to do with the sample was to understand how extremist and hateful creators use TikTok. So the features that they rely on, the things that they seem to favor over others. So it is a targeted sample. It is a sample that we deducted to look for this kind of content to help us learn more. And the reason why we did this is because TikTok doesn't offer an API, what is a way of researchers being able to access mass quantities of data on a platform. This is the same kind of processes that other platforms like Facebook and Twitter offer that would allow you to build and create, large-scale databases. But due to the lack of an effective API on TikTok that would allow researchers to examine this problem at scale and also to help TikTok in the process, of course, there's no way of scaling up this research or stating how systemic this problem is. So it certainly is a limitation. And our research was carried out entirely manually because of this limitation. With a gold standard API, this would allow for widened search functionality. Researchers will be able to search for videos and other content in a machine-readable format that is scaled up. And crucially, we'd also have access to live and historical data with other platforms. So yes, of course, there are limitations with this sample, but it really kind of stretches what is permissible on TikTok at the moment in terms of research.
So out of 1,000, you found 312 clips were promoting white supremacy. So we should not consider that to be 40% of all TikTok videos are promoting hate, can we?
No, of the millions, tens of millions of videos that are posted on TikTok, it's 40% are not white supremacist videos. Of this sample, 40% were found to promote white supremacy, but also found to express other forms of hatred and support for extremism as well. And what this research kind of shows is that a video that may express support for white supremacy might also be anti-Semitic or anti-Muslim in nature as well, which really points to one of the key findings of the report, which was that demonstrates that hate on TikTok is nuanced, it's multifaceted, it takes different streams, and that's what we were trying to examine with this research. How does hate live on TikTok?
Are they specific to a country-based hate phenomena, or they're sort of a universal international type that they're going in general? So what is the nature of these things? Do they anchor in a specific event in a country, or they just go on and on?
I think there's hate in every country, in every country's users of TikTok or other platforms as well, due to my own language limitations, but also capabilities, mainly English is what I'm saying. The research mainly focuses on English language content, and that will bias towards content that will originate from the US, from the UK, from other English-speaking nations. But it's also worth pointing out that content captured within this sample was not just English language content as well. There was also many different European dialects. There was also Arabic content captured as well on small scales, which for me anyways points towards a need for further research to examine how this content and how this problem of hate on social media platforms lives beyond English language content. Because one failing that we've seen across multiple social media platforms is that any steps or mitigation towards hateful content is often prioritized towards English language content, and there's often a gap when it moves beyond. And as we all know, hate exists in every language, in every culture, but the content guidelines and content moderation steps taken by platforms often only extend so far. So a little done, but more to do, I think, is the line there.
Kairan, there has been research by multiple parties which says the Facebook and other social media was used by different nations to create discord. For example, Russia has been accused of creating discord during the election, going after one candidate or the other and using the language of white supremacy and extremism and all those things. Did you find any of the foreign interference in the conversation which is taking place down the street from me?
No, we didn't find it, but we also weren't examining or looking for it. Now, it's possible that it could be there. It could be on other platforms as well. But at least in our research, we didn't find any signs of nation states using the platform to direct hatred or promote or active disinformation. But we also didn't see major organized groups, be they terrorist groups or extremist groups, which may point towards TikTok making and taking effective action against any groups that do try to set up on the app, but also speaks towards things that just simply weren't covered in the research. And when we compare different platforms and kind of the levels of, be it terrorist content or hate speech or disinformation, it's often hard to compare apples and oranges, Facebook with TikTok and things like that. In terms of TikTok's approach towards objectionable actions on their platform, they have shown signs they've grown up and learned the lessons that other platforms have faced in tackling this problem in their infancy. And you must remember as well that TikTok only became available internationally in 2018. That's 3 years ago. It's a remarkably short space of time for a platform to kind of take such a mantle and become such a popular app. But TikTok's policies are quite robust in terms of tackling hateful content on the app. But what I think this research does show is that their policies may be robust, but the practice shows they have still have a way to go. There's an enforcement gap between what the policies outlaw on the platform and the kinds of content that is still allowed to get through the cracks and get on live onto the platform.
Are you telling me that TikTokers are more innovative than the TikTok itself?
In many ways, yeah. One of the main findings of the report was the simple but effective methods that extremist TikTok creators seem to employ to get around content takedowns or the enforcement of community guidelines. What I'm talking about here are simple steps, like, so my account at Kieran O'Connor and V16, meaning version 16, that might be taken down, but the next day I can come back with Kieran O'Connor V17 and it's the very same account posting the very same content, but with a different username. And what we saw with this research is that multiple accounts were using this kind of methodology to return to the platform. Other tactics seem to be restricting who can comment on your videos, turning your account private for an amount of time, and other ways to essentially take the heat off. So yes, it does seem that TikTokers and extremist TikTokers included know how to navigate around the guardrails put in place to stop this kind of content on the platform.
Tell me this, is TikTok better in keeping an eye on hate as compared to Facebook?
It's tough to measure. They have shown signs that they have grown up and learned the lessons and the pitfalls that Facebook and other platforms like it faced. One of the major kind of findings that we speak about from this report is the enforcement gap in TikTok's approach to hate and extremism on the platform. Yes, hateful and extremist content is removed on TikTok, and to their credit as well, TikTok regularly release transparency reports detailing their content takedowns, something that other platforms don't do. But the removal process on TikTok, it's carried out inconsistently. TikTok has taken action against the content we've shared with them, for example, but ideally it's not up to researchers to inform TikTok that there's footage from the Christchurch terrorist attack on their platform, for example. So they do perform well, but they do also have a lot of gaps in their enforcement.
In your research, you discovered there are 81 videos of TikTok which were anti-Muslim or Islamophobic. Could you tell me what type of themes they had? What is it which they're using to create hate?
Yeah, it's important to note, first of all, that 81 videos, of course, in the grand scheme of things, isn't large, but it wasn't the major focus of this. And in our sample, it's also important to note that anti-Muslim hatred mainly took the form of content related to the Yugoslav wars and the murder of Bosnian Muslims during the mid-1990s. And the other strand of kind of anti-Muslim content was that related to the Christchurch terrorist attack and celebrating the actions of the person who carried out that attack. Anti-Muslim content included content about the 1995 genocide at Srebrenica in Bosnia, the denial of this event, the denial of this genocide, and the glorification of those responsible for carrying out these war crimes, such as the convicted war criminal, General Ratko Mladic. There was also songs used to celebrate Mladic. They were common in our sample, and they also featured in further detail. And these videos were used to spread hatred against Bosnian Muslim people, in addition to more general videos about the conflict as well. And when you see ways in which extremists are glorified and songs and music are used to glorify these people and their acts, you can see the kind of ways in which different features of TikTok are used or employed by extremist users to promote hatred and support extremism on the platform.
Tell me this, I mean, you use the term anti-Muslim. Report also uses the term anti-Muslim, anti-Semitic. Why have you decided not to use the term Islamophobia, which is much more established?
A matter of style, really. There was no large distinction in it. It was looking for anti-Muslim content that sought to otherize or to spread hatred against Muslim people, and content that sought to stigmatize, to dehumanize based on religion, based on cultures like this. But it really was a stylistic thing more than anything. It was still looking for content that sought to spread hatred against people of Muslim faith.
Do you have any idea of the demographics of the hate mongers on TikTok? We know that TikTok is more a realm of younger people, but so was Facebook when it started. But in America, normally when you see, Black Lives Matter movement or the Green movement, you see younger people who are more open and more connected with the other. But hate coming on TikTok seems to be a direct attack on that age group. What are your reflection on that thought?
Yeah, it's an important question. Though we didn't examine viewer or user characteristics or demographics in this research, we do know that TikTok's user base skews towards young users. So it's an educated guess to assume that not only are young people viewing this content, but also making and producing this content, and to think that young people are not only viewing such content that is hateful of communities and supportive of extremists, but also actively creating this content too is especially concerning. I didn't note this in the report, of course, but on hateful and extremist videos, regularly there were watermark links for explicit white supremacist channels on other websites. On the screen or in the comments, you could also see users asking or providing others with links or info on where to find, extremist manifestos or extremist content or wider ideological material like this on other platforms too. And all of that will generally suggest that there is a risk for young people being exposed and radicalized by content like this on platforms like TikTok.
Well, thank you so much, Karen, for your work and for your time.
Thank you.
Back to you, Samana.
Thank you, Imam Mujahid. That's all from our Chicago studios tonight. Thank you for tuning in. You can find previous episodes and more on our YouTube or Facebook. For more content, keep watching Muslim Network TV or visit muslimnetwork.tv. Salam and good night.